She is a PhD student in the Carnivorous Coexistence Lab at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the USA. For more, uh, her research combines wildlife ecology, social science, and spatial modeling to inform practical coexistence strategies on the multiple use landscapes such as farmland, neighboring protected areas. Meghan received her BSc in biology from the University of Texas at Austin in the USA, where she developed an interest in spatial ecology while studying the population on taxa reserves. In 2025, she carried out a pilot study for this of the project about the coexistence, combining tray camera, farmer interviews, and spatial analysis. In 2026, she will continue collecting her PhD data on this topic. Meghan is particularly interested in contributing to relevant practical insights that facilitate coexistence planning that support both people and carnivores. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome her so she take us through this great presentation. Thank you very much, Meghan. You are welcome.
Thank you, Vinod. Thanks for the kind introduction. Should I have my camera on while I present or no? What's the
It's
preference?
not necessary, but you can show us your face a little bit and then shout and
Just okay.
Just share your screen. Yeah,
Okay. Let me.
that's her. I think you see
Yeah.
all
Hello.
her. Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see the first slide? Not.
Of course, we can see it very well.
Wonderful. It's not AI, so thank you for asking.
Yeah, right. See you.
Oh, I'm not AI. That too. Also, Sylvie, my lecture whistling at the start. Thank you for doing that. All right. I'm going to. I guess I can leave my camera on. That's fine. Okay. I just messed up the screen. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So, as Vinod said, I am a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the US. And this presentation is about a pilot study that I did with my research partners last year in 2025. So just kind of going over the methods and some preliminary results from it. Before I begin, thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure and honor to be invited to speak to you guys. I really appreciate it, and thanks for joining. All right, so the study is called Navigating Boundaries, the Influence of Physical Barriers on Carnivore Movement and Human-Carnivore Coexistence and Conflict. And again, my name is Meghan. Okay, before I get started, I have a lot of people to thank and organizations to thank, of course, the country of Rwanda and permitting agencies who gave generous permission for us to do all this work, RDB, NCST. You are, of course, my supervisors, Beth Kaplan and Antoine Nsabimana, and Vinod, of course. And then Akagera Management Company has been completely integral to this work, and I name a few people here, but of special note is Emma Evers and just the entire conservation and research team. And then from my institution, my core research team are my advisors, Adrian Trevis and Lisa Naughton, as well as my research partner, Allison Fisher, and our very, very essential field assistant last year, Nadine, and the Akagera community liaison, Pacifique, were both completely imperative to all of this work. So many thanks to them, as well as everybody else on this slide. Many people to thank. All right, so a quick overview of what I'll talk about today. First, I'll go over the background of the work, as well as our research questions, and then the methods we used, as well as early stage results, and then just kind of a quick glance through the proposed next steps, which are kind of current steps at this point. All right, so a bit of background. In this initial research phase, which was, again, last year, 2025, June through August, we conducted a pilot study of human-carnivore coexistence and conflict, focusing on farming communities located west of Akagera National Park and south of Akagera Military Zone, shown here in the map. The little white outline is our study area. And this area is where people and large carnivores can be in close proximity. That is our focus. So as you all may know, Akagera and Gabiro are both bordered by physical barriers, with Akagera having an electric fence and Gabiro a boundary trench. And while these barriers influence wildlife movement, there are still uncertainties, of course, about which species may be able to cross and under what conditions. So in these farming communities adjacent to Akagera and Gabiro, conflict with large carnivores, and specifically our focus was leopards and spotted hyenas, because those are the large carnivores there, conflict still occurs, even despite the barriers. So this livestock loss is a key issue for the villages here, and incidents can result in farmers requesting payment from Rwanda's National Compensation Program. But even with that renowned compensation program, conflict and coexistence are still key topics for both these nearby villages as well as Akagera management. So in collaboration with the partners in Akagera and the University of Rwanda, we designed this pilot study to lay the groundwork for my continued human-carnivore conflict and coexistence research to inform coexistence planning, hopefully. And just a quick note about our lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We carry out research on human-carnivore coexistence globally, so we're very thankful and excited to be able to take this expertise and apply it here outside Akagera, because it offers an incredible opportunity to examine how these barriers and carnivore movement and human livelihoods and perceptions all kind of interact to shape coexistence outcomes. And I said here because I'm in Rwanda. I don't know if that probably is not clear, because how would you know that? But I'm in Akagera right now, which is fantastic. All right, so quickly, the research questions that we were kind of getting at. The first one being about the barriers, and we were just kind of curious, how do these physical barriers, meaning, again, Akagera's electric fence and Gabiro's boundary trench, how do those barriers influence wildlife movement? Second question was about carnivores in the farming communities. And to what extent do those large carnivores out there present, or to what extent are they present in the farming communities? Third question was about farmers and community members' perceptions of both the carnivores as well as Akagera. And then fourth question was about conflict. So, what are these local farming communities' experiences of conflict? And and conflict, we conducted farmer interviews. For the final question, the conflict, we're also very interested in risk mapping, so mapping the probability of human-wildlife conflict across this landscape. And we're still in the process of obtaining permissions to access and work with the spatially explicit data on compensation and complaints outside Akagera. So for that reason, we haven't yet completed the risk mapping portion of this pilot study, but when we receive permissions to work with those data, we are still planning on carrying out that investigation of the spatial patterns of livestock loss in this study area. All right, so there were three categories of trail cameras that we deployed, and I'll briefly describe each. First were the cameras along Akagera's fence, which were designed to address that first research question about barriers and how they influence movement. So we focused on the 7-kilometer stretch of fence south of the Akagera-Gabiro intersection point, shown on the map here. And to determine where exactly to place camera stations, we divided that 7 kilometers into intervals and then used a coin flip generator. I didn't have a coin, I could have done that, but I just used the internet. And just decided randomly whether or not a given interval was going to contain a camera station. And using that method, we identified 10 intervals for camera stations, and those are shown on this map as yellow circles. At each of those stations, so at each of those yellow circles, we installed Panthera trail cameras pointing in opposite directions up and down the fence line for maximum coverage to be able to detect any wildlife crossings in the view of the camera. In 2 of the cases, for 2 of these yellow circles, we attached the cameras to trees, as shown in the photo on the left on this slide. And then in 8 cases, we used metal stakes fashioned by Akagera's Kind Workshop, and those are shown in the image, the long, narrow image. That's a metal stake with our cameras. So we had 8 of those, and then we installed all cameras and recorded several site covariates that we figured reflected important characteristics at each of those locations. We collected this photo data to August, although 2 camera stations remained in the field past that last date. And in total, we 700 for the entire collection period. We visited each station 3 to 4 times to change batteries or download data, clear memory cards, or change settings if necessary. And also for this first research question about the barriers, we'd hoped to monitor Gabiro's trench with a similar methodology similar to the fence, to monitor it for wildlife crossings, but we didn't receive permission from the military, so we did not put any cameras along the trench. Just for exploratory data collection, we did install 7 camera stations several meters back from the trench and pointed away from it, so southward. And data processing for those stations is still ongoing, but no monitoring was done at the trench or Gabiro military zone, of course. And then finally, to address the second research question about carnivores in farming communities, we asked community members about known or suspected den sites out in the farmlands. And several people could identify broad areas where dens were possibly located, but due to time constraints, we were just unable to go canvass those ourselves to find the dens. So we ended up installing 4 trail cameras at a hyena den in Muchuchu A, pictured, it's on the map here as an orange dot, the sort of like center low orange dot. That's 4 trail cameras at the den site. And the goal here was just to observe hyena presence and behavior outside Akagera and Gabiro. And this den site was already known to Akagera management and the community, so it was not nothing surprising. We were just monitoring behavior. All right, so quick about the farmer interview. It's actually not that quick about the farmer interview methodology. Like I mentioned before, our interviews were designed to address questions 3 and 4, research questions 3 and 4, about people's perceptions of carnivores and their experiences with human-carnivore conflict. But before we did any interviews, we started by introducing ourselves and the project at community meetings in Muchuchu. And our field assistant, Nadine, described our work and our goals with this. And then after getting permission from the communities and their leaders for our research, our field assistant Nadine conducted interviews in Kenya, Rwanda, and then translated respondents' answers into English for data entry. And to do so, she used a tablet for just kind of convenient data collection, as well as 4 printed materials at the beginning of each interview, one of which was a verbal consent script for the interview, and the other 3 were pages of carnivore photos shown here. As you can see, one is just leopard photos, one is just hyena photos, and then one was a collection of carnivore photos, different species. So for the first 20-ish interviews, we visited respondents' properties with the village chiefs. And then after those interviews, we shifted to what we considered a central site approach, where the village chiefs, Abeli and Mugenzi, contacted livestock farmers for us and coordinated interview days at central community locations, where we would go to do the interviews. And then we also conducted a small number of interviews independently of the village chiefs when opportunities arose. All of these interviews were collected between the 17th of June and the 3rd of July and the 1st and 6th of August. And then just to kind of go over what exactly these interviews contained, there were 6 sections. The first was just kind of preliminary record-keeping data. We filled it out, not the respondents. The second section, which was about species ID and livestock defenses, we used the printed photos of carnivores shown on the slide to ask about respondents' experiences with and perceptions of hyenas, leopards, and other carnivores. And then the third section was just demographic info and data on livestock ownership. The fourth section was about wildlife damage and compensation complaints. So we asked respondents to describe any recent livestock loss incidents. Suspect any subsequent compensation procedures. In the fifth section, we asked about respondents' satisfaction ratings with the fence and the trench, and also asked about which wild animals people were happy to see on their land and which they were proud to have in Akagera, and what benefits they receive from Akagera. And then in the final section, we just sort of closed on a light conversational note, asking about people's family totem animals, which was delightful. All right, some early stage results for the cameras, starting with the fence cameras. Those fence cameras collected over 500,000 photos. So data processing is ongoing, but preliminary counts indicate that about half of those photos are blanks, meaning they were triggered, the camera was triggered by either vegetation moving or shadows. And then of the non-blank images, about 50% of those were of people or livestock moving along the fence. Most of the remaining photos are of birds, herbivores, and primates, and then just a small fraction, less than 1%, actually contained carnivores. And within those, we captured the nocturnal movements of all 3 large carnivore species in Akagera, the leopards, spotted hyenas, and lions. Some photos, example photos here. And we also did capture a couple leopard photos outside the park on the community side of the fence, but no photos appear to have captured a carnivore crossing the fence, which was a big important thing to be looking for. And as I said previously, we're still processing the data from the camera stations that we placed back away from Gabiro's Trench. And finally, the hyena den in Machuchu A, those trail cameras just recorded nocturnal activity by a small clan of hyenas. And all of these are the early stage results for those first 2 research questions, 1 and 2, about the wildlife movement around physical barriers, as well as wildlife in farmlands. So some interview results. We conducted a total of 79 with livestock farmers in the study area. So just some information about our respondent pool. Men made up 80% of the pool and women 20%. There was a decent spread of property sizes, as shown in this upper bar here. The most common property size was 15 to 25 hectares, and the least common was over 25 hectares. Properties represented in our interviews were situated throughout the study area, so 34% were adjacent to the fence, meaning right up next to the fence. 25% were adjacent to the trench, and then 41% were away from both, or adjacent to neither. So a good spread of who and where we received our interview data from. And then the livestock defenses used for leopards and hyenas were very similar. So the most common were dogs and bow muzzle defenses, and then the least common was fire. And nobody reported any use of alarms, protective items, of clothing worn by domestic animals, or killing or trapping. And in the upper graph here, you can see nearly all farmers owned cattle. That's the blue bar, 95% owned cattle. And many also kept chickens and dogs and sheep/goats or shoats. And then in the lower graph here, you can see farmers reported seeing hyenas on their properties pretty frequently. That's the left bar of this lower graph. The black box is highlighting that 81%, a total of 81% of respondents saw hyenas daily or weekly. And then leopards, which are the bar on the right in the lower graph, leopards were sighted far less frequently, with only 17% of farmers reporting daily or weekly sightings, and 51%, which is what's in the black outlined box on that bar, 51% of farmers saw hyenas either yearly or almost never. Okay, so next, quick discussion of the early stage results for farmers' perceptions, which is the focus of research question 3. When presented simultaneously with those printed photos I showed earlier of leopards and hyenas, 90% of respondents correctly identified leopards. And that informed the rest of our interview, but that was an important first thing to kind of clarify. And when asked about which carnivore they were most worried about, 66% said hyenas and 30% said leopards, and 4% reported other carnivores. When asked whether their tolerance for wildlife visiting their land would increase as a result of receiving compensation, 46% said yes, 54% said no. And then when asked if their tolerance would improve as a result of receiving help to either install or maintain livestock defenses, 81% said yes and 18% said no. And 1% were unsure. They are not shown on that bar because that was too small a sliver. Okay. We also asked respondents to identify where hyenas and leopards come from before arriving on their properties, or their perceptions of that. And the results are shown in that upper graph now. Nearly half of respondents, about 46%, said that hyenas come from nearby areas outside Akagera and Gabiro, meaning farmlands outside both zones for hyenas. And then for leopards, the most common perception, at just about a third, was that they arrive from Akagera. And then finally, the bottom graph here shows that respondents expressed varying levels of satisfaction with the protection offered by Akagera's fence and Gabiro's trench from large wildlife, with 80% being very satisfied with Akagera's fence and about half being dissatisfied to some degree with the Gabiro's trench. And moving along to early stage results about conflict experiences, which again is the research question number 4. We asked respondents to describe recent incidents, like I said, up to 3 of them. And we had 57 respondents, which was 72% of our interviewees, told us about recent experiences, and we learned about 101 recent conflict incidents. So that's what all of these results are about. So of those 101 incidents described, 60% were attributed to hyenas and 25% to leopards, with 11% attributed to either unknown species, or 11% to unknown and 4% to other carnivores. And then the most numerous livestock killed were sheep and goats, with 137 lost to hyenas and 48 to leopards. And then also cattle with 24 lost to hyenas and 6 to leopards, as described in these 101 incidents. And also of the 101 incidents described, compensation was requested for 49% of them. And of that 49%, 57% resulted in compensation payments. And when asked about the timeline for that, we received answers about the time span being between reporting or filing for compensation and receiving payment, time span of between 1 and 7 months with an average of 3.8. And then all respondents were also asked whether they had ever experienced livestock loss and not requested compensation for it, and 60% said yes. That's all 79 respondents. Okay. And now, just to finish with some perceived benefits, some good things identified by respondents. Nearly all respondents expressed pride in Rwanda's wildlife and natural habitats. And when asked which wild animals they're proud to have in Akagera, they frequently listed lions, elephants, rhinos, many more. And a large majority also reported feeling that they received benefits from Akagera. 92% said that they received benefits from Akagera. And they commonly cited community development, infrastructure improvements like schools and roads, and then tourism revenue as well. And then, as shown in this figure on the right now, respondents also identified benefits from living with large carnivores, and the most common answer there was tourism revenue, with that was mentioned by 71% of respondents. These numbers don't add up to 100%, by the way, because it was a multiple. They could just name as many as they felt were accurate. So tourism revenue was very popular, common. All right. So some quick next steps just to discuss kind of the plan moving forward. So we plan to continue monitoring Akagera's fence for wildlife crossings, as well as mapping the risk landscape of human-carnivore conflict outside Akagera once we move forward the permissions of compensation and complaint data. And Akagera is conducting their regular carnivore survey very soon. It happens every few years, and I've been kindly invited to help support on the project because it's trail camera based and very related to this research that I'm doing. So in addition to supporting Akagera on that high priority work, I will also have the opportunity to work alongside Akagera staff, namely the conservation and research team, for training on carnivore research methods. And relatedly, throughout all the phases of this research, both last year's as well as moving forward, I'm committed to working with and training Rwandan students and interns and early career professionals in conservation research methods that integrate social science, ecological science, and spatial and statistical analyses. So if anybody wants to chat after this or ask questions, I would be very excited to hear from you. And that is all from me. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, interesting topic. Before I welcome other people, want to ask you a question. Do you have some recommendations on how to enhance carnivorous human coexistence in and around Akagera National Park?
I think I do. I don't want to speak out of turn because that's part of what the project is for, and I'm also not a full expert. I'm just a student, and but I think one thing that's super important to mention right off the bat is the importance of involving communities in the area and figuring out which is something that Akagera is amazing about. Akagera management is amazing about already, but just something to continue with and enhance further, because figuring out and learning from people outside what is needed, what are the issues, what are their expectations, all of that is not something that someone can
erega
just
bafite
walk
icyo
in and know
bashingiraho batanga
already.
gift
So
ese
really engaging
kwizera
with
kwabo
people here and finding out what's necessary to answer that question is I think
aho bajya mereka
the
dutandukanye
preface to answering that question.
utandukanye inshuti
It's a fantastic
inshuti
question.
zawe
That
n'abari
is
kuri
the
waiting
question
list
actually. So,
abo bantu babiri
but I
batanu
can't answer it.
Yeah,
uzi kubatandukanya
yeah. Thank you very much. I was asking the
ntiwangize
question
muri
because I
waiting list
know
se
uh, issue in the
ko ntabwo ndi umuyahudi
it's to study this kind of research and
ariko si ndi umuyahudi
Oh, I don't know if it's my
turi
connection.
inshuti ariko iri kuri waiting list
coexistence.
Sorry, could you say it again? The connection kind of cut
Yeah,
out.
I was
ndi
just
kuyihe
saying that it's always
ndaho nyine
a
ntacyo
big
nica na nicyo
issue
nyijije
when it comes to the carnivorous human
ndaho ntacyo nishe na nicyo
coexistence
nyijije
because we have different
imana
understanding.
irihangana
Some people think, oh, if it's come outside of the park, it's better I kill it
ariko
before it kills me. You see?
imana
Yeah, that's
irihangana
some perspective of different people. But others says, oh, okay, those are good for the country, for the tourism. That's
hari igihe
why I
ubwonko bwawe
should
bukwemerera ikintu
make sure
umutima wawe
it
nako umutima wawe
returns to
ukwemerera
the
ikintu
park
ubwonko bwawe bugakubwira ko
safely.
utari umuyahudi
Yeah, they
ugahita
have different
ugahita wica
understanding, but yeah,
eh
I see also a lot of effort invested by
ibyifuzo
the Akagera
by'umutima
National Park
n'iby'ubwonko biba
to
bikeneye
enhance
kuba
this
connected hano hagati
coexistence
harimo
by
latifa kugira ngo
organizing
ayikonekitinge
different races and competitions, doing
uwo ni ndingona sheri
radio advertisement and
aba
community
ndingona uzabaze
outreach,
inshuti yawe
like
niba munari kumwe aho hafi
teaching
ibaze ati
or
harimo n'ingona uva ukunda
educating local
gusubiza
community on how to live with animals. All of these efforts are
nagusubije
much visible, but I think they need to be enhanced. Maybe from recommendations of research like yours and others.
yewe niyo bigwa
Thank
mu
you.
kwa cumi
That's
n'abiri
kind of you. That's a great point that people
eshatu
outside. It's not like you can chat
eshatu
with community members outside and it's one unilateral unanimous opinion or need out in communities. People will have
imico
different
myiza kuko
opinions
bituma
about
abantu
what needs to be done with the
like
animals or what should be
baba
done.
bari aho nyine
And
kurushaho
that's a very complex topic, but I think Akagera is doing a great job at approaching it. And I mean, nobody's perfect at that
mwakoze
answer yet
ndakoreye
across the
Yeah,
world,
dukoreye mu
but
rugo
working toward that and kind of finding, especially in our lab, we're very
shahise mu kanya
focused
gashize
on
iminota mike ishize
multi-species justice and kind of finding the justice that's not
nubwo
only
rero
about
dufite
people but
izihe
also about
gahunda zasubiriye
animals
butare
but
ryari
also about people and kind of finding the balance there and all this research
ntabwo
is
nemerewe
really kind of
kugufatisha suri i
working
kigali
toward that.
cyane nabyo ntabwo
yes,
byemewe
that's the core thing. Yeah, I want to welcome other people to ask or
yarambwira
comment.
nimba byemewe kugufatisha gusa ibindi rero niba byemewe kugufatisha ibindi bizamenyekana
As a reminder, you can just unmute and speak or write in the chat room your question. Want to welcome Garis.
Hello.
overall is
Thank
better
you for the presentation. I have a question. The beyond the physical barriers, are there more sustainable way for human and carnivores to live side by side without harming each other? Apart from physical barriers, do we have any methods?
hari bishobora figure it
That's
out
a great question. I think there are it kind of, there are a lot of ways to answer that question,
by
and
like
again, I
Saturday
don't know that
morning
I'll be
mbaye
able to
navuye
cover
goma
all the bases
kuwa gatandatu mbaye maze kwambuka I can confirm
as
ariko
now
gutya
or of
ngomba
now,
guhita nza i
right
Kigali
now.
I think
But I think one way to think about it is and this is kind of common in the literature as far as I know, is the question of whether people and animals should be should coexist separately, and that's kind of the physical barrier option. And then the other option being if
cyawe uri
kind of
kutagize ngo nari
integration
umuyahudi
is
sawa.
possible, and that debate is one that there's not an answer to
ikigenda
because
cyahita se
it is an
kandi so
outstanding debate,
unyiteje uvuga ngo
and of
sayiti
course both approaches are have their kind of pros and cons. But if just sort of hypothetically to remove the barriers around Akagera and Gabiro, I think it would be extremely
kariteka mani
difficult and problematic, specifically in this context, because that's sort of part of
uzamenya ko atari
the
iteka ubu ntabwo urakora
big picture debate
numara
is
gukora
how
uzamenya ko atari
how
iteka
human behavior affects everything,
ntabwo ari
and
iteka
the all the variables at play, and people will of course kind of
izamura
like
uko warizamura
be used to
kose
the way
nta
of
kintu
life that they
byageraho.
have. And then in the case of Akagera, I think the removal of physical barriers is not
njyewe
an
ndi umuntu
option
mwiza mu
because,
gukina uriya
and
mukino
I mean,
ndebe
as I
umusore
mentioned in the
tukawukina
presentation, very
buriya
positive
twahuriyemo
respondents were very positive
ndi
about the
umuntu mwiza ku
fence.
buryo turamutse
For
duhuye
example,
tukawukina
lions
wakibaza niba
simply
bamuhaye
don't
haraye
exit the
buriya
park,
myenda
which is
nayiguhaye
amazing, from their
ubwo
perspective
rero
specifically, because it's,
ikikubwira ko
it
ibyo
removes
mvuga
a
mba nkomeje
major
ni uko
potential conflict
nongera
animal.
kwibutsa ko
So
abayahudi bahari ariko
I don't know that there's a great, I think it varies by site, it varies by history, varies by animal. You guys ask really great questions that I can't answer.
bakaba tubibona ko iyo ari scam
But to kind of put it in like as succinctly as possible, I
Ariko
think there are ways and researchers are
ibyiyoreye
kind of looking into that and doing
nutangira
researches
kugabanya imibano
into
n'abayahudi
research into
tuzamenya
options,
icyerekezo
viable options that
nzahita
really
nkwereka
both serve
itandukaniro hagati
both
ya
the
rifani
communities
n'ikazi
as well as the animals. But it's really difficult because of
ibintu
you know
byawe
all those
uba
variables,
wibereyemo mba mbona ntazi
site,
ibyo uri
animal, history,
njye nigeze kukwandikira ndakubwira
needs,
ni nuba
all of
seriye
it. So I don't know that that
Yeah,
was an answer to your question.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a great presentation.
Thank you.
nta kibazo
I think I would follow up then.
Yeah, yes, please. Is it Ferdinand?
Yes, this is Ferdinand.
Yes, please, come.
Yes, so Megan, really
kereka ibyo udashaka
interesting
gusa
insights so far. I'm really looking forward to hearing more after you have done a
bikabyo
bit more
mfite
advanced
mani
analysis of your data.
ngeze kuri eji
I
y'ubuzima aho
had one
bakubwira ngo
rather curious
amahitamo uzagira
question,
uzayakomerezeho
and it's on the
nta mwanya wo
fact
kwirirwa ukina
of
nabyo
attacks on human lives.
ni byiza
Did your questions include any of
wabaye
such?
na muremure
And did you get any sort of insights on the historical insight on if there have been any in the past, if there have been, there's still some currently, and what such impacts are, what kinds of compensation payments exist in such situations, and
se
were
buriya
there
nyuma
any
y'irayidura
such
muyahudi
insights you
ntazagutamo
could gather
beduze ugahita wongera
on
ukagaruka
this
kuri forume
particular subject?
nyuma y'irayidi
That's a very good question. We didn't ask specifically about human injury, just because our focus was livestock loss specifically. We, I think we heard while moving through communities and just kind of meeting people that maybe in the last several years there had been a couple, but it sounds like very few, and I don't know that anybody claimed a carnivore had been the species to do it. I think it was more often hippos, if I'm not mistaken. And not hippos coming from Akagera, because there's a wetland that borders our study site as well, and I think that was considered where hippos would be coming from. So I don't have details on that. That was sort of just what like the very little that I heard. But on the whole, it was certainly not a talked about subject. I think it's, at least in our study area, a pretty infrequent or very infrequent occurrence, thankfully. So yeah, not too much to report on that, which I guess is a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. That brings me to the question. Maybe I missed it in your presentation, but did your research also did it explore the kind and nature of human wildlife conflicts happening around Akagera National Park? to see your human
niyo
injuries,
sikamu ya mbere
animal
numvise muri bibiri na
predation,
makumyabiri na
like
gatandatu
crop leading, things like that. Did you
niyo
try
sikamu ya
to
mbere numvise muri bibiri na makumyabiri na
map
gatandatu
those conflicts
Eh,
already existing in the area and
ibyo bintu
explored what are the
barabyigisha
most frequent, what are the
buriya
least?
ntabwo uzi icyo umugabo ashaka
I love that question because that is one of the things I'm most excited about.
icyo umugabo
The answer
ashaka
is not yet. We haven't done that yet because we're still working on
byamusaba kujya
getting
mu gitondo
the permissions
yamara
to work
kukibona
with
yibanda mu
those
gitondo
data.
niba yinkoranye siporo
Akagera
akagarukaho ariko
Management
nta
Company
bihenze
has the complaint
nta
data set,
bidanje
and then of course Special Guarantee Fund has the compensation data set,
ariko bakomeza
and all of those
utanga
are
inyigisho wabona
extremely
izaza wenda
sensitive
izo
data. They have
zizamushiramo agafata
people's
izawe
names, people's
undi abayahudi ntibajya bapfa
the coordinates
kuvuga ibintu
of
batabizi
incidents. So getting and working with those data is a pretty
wenda nk'ubu
sensitive topic, and
ntabwo
we're
benjamin
just kind
netanyahu
of working towards
benjamin
receiving
netanyahu
permissions for that. But that is definitely one of the things I'm really excited about because there's a lot to ask. Possibly too much for one PhD to ask about
Yes.
all of that when it comes to the
bagirire
spatial patterns of all the different
ese
types of conflict, as well as the
gufunga
species
se
and
bikuraho abayahudi kuko
the
abayahudi
livestock
bishaka bikuraho
defenses, or
abantu bifitemo
just
inyigisho za
conflict
zionisme kuzimu
conflict interventions that were in use and whether they were effective, and
sawa
just tons of
sawa
questions that
sawa
can be
mama
asked, and
rukundo we
probably incredibly informative results to come of it, specifically for Akagera
Eh,
Management Company. Hopefully, that's my hope, is that by doing that sort of
banditse
thing,
ngo bizashira
it can be informative for their
bizashira
coexistence planning with the communities outside the park. And looking forward to it, but
washinga imiti
haven't
yazize
done that quite yet. I'll have to get back to you on
ntabwo
that.
wakemera imiti yazo
Oh,
n'iyo
that's
living imiti
great.
yazo
Yeah,
so
that will be a very nice uh,
nta
research
muntu uretse iminsi
outcome.
kandi iminsi muyirimo
And of course, yes, you are right. The park will love it.
I hope so. It helps. I mean, I am incredibly lucky to be able to work with park management
nta
as closely
mutima
as I
mubi mfite
do.
mu
Emma
mutima
Andrews
wanjye
is on the call. She's the
nta
conservation and
mutima mubi
research
mfite
manager here, and a close collaborator. So
mwembi ishaza ryo
it's
ntiryabura ariko
incredibly
ibintu byose byo
beneficial
ntabwo
as a
bihari
researcher to get somewhere and
ariko
kind
nimba
of
bambwiye
develop
ko
these close
gusiba
collaborative
bikuraho umutima
relationships, and know for
n'amarangamutima
sure that
yawe
the work I'm
n'ibitekerezo
doing actually matters
Eh,
to park management, to communities.
sawa
It's actually relevant and valuable. Hopefully, not
ariko
just sort of done
tuzabonana tuvugane ku gihugu
in a vacuum of
cy'isezerano igihe
sorts.
uzaba uri
So very
bukigereho
lucky to have Akira collaborators here.
isiraheli
Yeah, thank you. I want to open
sigeze
the
gusa njye
discussion
waherekeje
again. I want to
impaka
welcome other people
uterekana
to ask
n'umuntu
questions or
usenya imana
comment.
ya isiraheli
But first
none
of
se ubwo
all, I
urumva
want to
ufite
remind you
icyerekezo
that
atari kujya muri
I
isiraheli
put a Google link in the chat room for
reka
me
reka reka
to just register the
abayahudi ba
attendance
york ikeneye
record
y'abayahudi
today
impamvu
to
mubwira
see
ni
who
umuyahudi
came for the seminar today. And also, I'd like you to
niyo mpamvu nakubwira ngo ni
mention
umuyahudi
if you would like to speak to us
naho
in one
barahobye
Wednesday in the future. So don't forget to register and also tell us about that if you have something. Yeah, I have someone here, my clan, a long time.
ntago naguhereza
Yeah.
urabizi
How are you
ntago
doing,
naguhereza
Michael?
Hmm?
Yes, I'm here, and I've got to go here in a minute. Very well done, Megan. Thank you very
wakumirwa
much. It's
umirwa gute se kandi
good
Thank you.
preliminary steps for
ubayeho mu buzima bw'inzozi
getting
zawe
answers to some really
urakumurwa
important
gute
questions. I'm doing
wakumurwa
great.
gute
I am
mu
recently
buzima bw'inzozi
retired and trying to
zawe
figure out what that means, but still interested. So
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long time. It has been
Eh,
a long time without seeing you. It's good to see you again.
it has taken me 2 years to get fully disengaged, but I think as of about 3 weeks ago,
ibintu
I
amata
finally pulled it
birashira
off. But I'm not going to check out
amata
completely.
birashira
So I'm due elsewhere. I have to go. Thanks very much. Bye all.
Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah, I
ese
want to
ubu kino minsi
see
yose
other
urayisibye
people
havuyemo iyo wagiye mu
here who
kibada
wanted to
wishinga he
just
ku
comment
myenda
or ask questions.
iyi minsi yose urayisibye havuyemo iyo wagiye mu kibada cyangwa
I don't see any.
I can see some hands raised, Vinat. Do you see those hands
Hmm?
raised?
Oh,
Or maybe they can just unmute and speak.
muri iyi irindwi ine niyo wagiyemo mu kipada, itatu yaje kugenda iteze irengaho.
Beth, I think 1 and 2, Galisa and Ferdinand, already spoke. Their hands are just relics. But
There's
number 3 is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Spoken,
Good to hear
yes.
from all of you. My name is Bosco Tukwate. I'm from Uganda.
Mhm.
And I work in Queen Elizabeth National Park and Marshes and Falls National Park.
nyine njyewe
And I was very excited to receive this link from our friend. And the topic is quite brilliant. It's a very good one, and it explains basically what's faced all over Africa and the carnivores. We also have such kind of scenarios in Uganda where there's lots and lots and lots of human wildlife conflicts. And in the park where I'm working in, called Queen Elizabeth National Park, it's kind of a special park where we've got 11 fishing villages embedded within the park. And each of those villages has got about 2,000 people. And well, initially they were only entitled to just come and fish, then go away. But recently they've just been seen, putting up permanent structures and are rearing animals. We've got so many cows. Recently doing an assessment and found that one of the people's got about 1,200 cows. And well, you find that also they're kind of they've been poisoning lions. If you check on the internet, you're gonna find it. Uganda's parks in the southwest have registered a huge loss of lions to poisoning from these cattle owners. I mean, I'm very glad that you're actually assessing the implications and influence of barriers, because whereas we're setting these electric fences, we're not using the kind of fencing that you used from the photos that I saw today. We're using this kind of the fence where you got wires stretched over like a meter or a meter and a half. You know what I'm talking about.
You just mean along the ground?
Like you have a pole of about a meter tall, or several poles on the line, and you have like this wires running through them. And yeah, if I get a photo on my phone, I'll share this on the group. And yeah, so also those cases we find that where there is a bit of a trench, some warthogs dig trenches, and lions also use those trenches to just cross through and still go into the villages and eat cows before you know. And also it seems like it's also kind of ineffective with leopards. Leopards are quite smart. Here you realize on camera truck footage they just climb over like they climb over a small kind of a certain elevation and then jump themselves over the wires, and before you know they've killed like 15 goats in the village. So yeah, these are problems happening all over the world, and I appreciate that your efforts actually are focused on this. Hope that your paper gets accepted, maybe then we can read about it more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Could I ask a follow-up question then?
Yes, please.
Yes. So but mine is kind of in line with effectiveness of some of these physical barriers. So obviously, electric fences seem very potent, but I would have imagined they are equally very expensive. So how does management draw the line between managing this interaction between humans and wildlife, and without conflict, but still within a certain reasonable budgetary confines? So if you, the case of Uganda, which one of our colleagues have mentioned, is a solution, but not potent enough because these animals are starved. and they find
urumva
ways
nari
of
kuba ngifite
managing. If
amafaranga
it's
nziranye
electric,
nawe.
then it's electric. Now, then they naturally would be shocked and they would not make progress. But then that, of course, would also mean more expenses.
Mm.
So, do you
Mm.
consider kind of understanding how to navigate along these lines in your work? Or what would you advise them to potentially be a policy recommendation context that's kind of,
Eh,
similar to yours?
yaragiye kuva
That's
muri
a
tere
that's a great
yashize.
question. I'm not focused on the sort of financial aspects, financial time, money, all of that of the fence, construction and maintenance. It's an incredibly good and relevant point.
muri
Um,
perime
can
hariya
make
mwagiye kayenzamo
make or
amazi
break whether this is a
y'igihe kingana
feasible
gito.
option for a given park or a given community.
Tu.
I actually can't really speak to it because I don't know enough about the financials of it, but it is. I can say that it's an imperative point
Okay.
to be considered before
ndumva ari sawa.
before intervention steps are taken, because it's not,
ndumva ari
as
sawa
you say, it's not
kuko nyuma yaho
feasible for everywhere
nanjye
it does.
dusubira
And
mu burasirazuba
another,
naravuze nti
I keep
karebe
saying
karenza
Akagera, it's
ariko yo
crazy.
kuko bayohereza nyuma nabashije kugira
They do an
management
incredible job at maintaining their electric fence. People walk it every single day, the entire length of it.
mubwira aba
So
boss
it
banyu
it does
bakaduha
take a
amafaranga mbere yo
lot
kujya mu
of
kazi.
work and time and money to
Oya
keep
ugera
up
gumana
a
yo
fence
igice
to this
nabwo
degree. So I think
wagurisha.
yeah, it's something that needs to be
ariko
considered
ntacyo ubika
before
amafaranga
this is
ntacyo
attempted
ayasigaye
everywhere, because it's
tuzayarya
not
kuwa
an everywhere
gatandatu.
solution. But it is, I guess, it works where it works. So I think we need to kind of study the way that it works and the species that it's applicable to, and kind of be able to figure out site-specific interventions
amafaranga ye n'ayawe
that,
ariko amafaranga yawe
that make
saye.
sense here, and then ones that make sense elsewhere if it's not the same.
nyine amafaranga ye n'ayawe ariko amafaranga yawe saye.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the feedback. We are past 4 p.m., which is our usual end of the seminar. That's why I'd like us to close. And I don't see any hand or any question in the chat room which is not answered. Yeah, so please, I'd like to remind you again to fill the Google form in the chat room. That's very important for us to keep the record of attendance and also hear from you. I want to close by thanking very much Meghan for this great research, and I wish you all the best for the next phase of the research. Yeah, we stay in touch, and maybe at the end of next year, you will be telling another story, the second part of this.